Hey there, welcome back to another Regular Guy Vikings Hour. Here we are, it's a bye week. The Vikings are going to remain 5-0 through the week, and we're going to go ahead and just keep making shows anyway. And what I have planned for you tonight, I didn't do, obviously, a game preview show because there is no game to preview. So tonight what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick to just a little bit of Vikings news. We're going to look at our power rankings. We're going to, of course, pick Week 6. I'm going to do my Fermented Five again. A little bit less money this time. I'll explain why later. And then we'll talk extensively about the trade deadline. So with that said, let's go ahead and get going. All right. And we're going to start off with just a little bit of Vikings news. So I'll keep it here on the main cam while I do that. But basically, what we saw happen this week was that Jalen Redmond actually got released. And he's a defensive lineman, and he's been active a couple of games so far this year. I haven't seen any news yet about him going back to the practice squad, and I certainly hope he does, because from what I saw out of him in preseason and even in the little bit of playing time he had so far this year, I think he's definitely worth hanging on to, and he could be a part of our future kind of youth movement on the defensive line. So I really hope to see him back to the practice squad. And it would actually, I think this can be seen a little bit of a silver lining for a couple of reasons, and that is that if Redmond gets moved back to the practice squad, that's actually going to open up maybe some potential playing time for Levi Drake Rodriguez. So in those situations where we activate an additional defensive lineman, perhaps LDR will now get that activation, and maybe he'll start to see some playing time, and I would just love to see him get into some games and start to show what he's got. In addition to that, we don't really know what this roster opening means, right? This could mean either that TJ Hawkinson's going to get activated back to the 53, which really would bode well for his possibility of playing versus Detroit, or it could mean that there's a trade coming up. And I thought it was interesting that the release happened to be from the defensive line, because perhaps we have a trade involving a new defensive lineman coming up. We don't know yet. I certainly think that's a possibility. Really, only one kind of side note, just a personal thing, is that if it ends up just being Hawkinson added back to the 53, which is exciting for obvious reasons for the offense, but to see Redmond get released and not Brian Asamoah, that kind of bothers me a little bit. I know we need depth at inside linebacker, I get that, but honestly, I don't know. I don't really see what Asamoah brings to the team, and I think that Dallas Gant could probably play better right now. And he's on the practice squad now. So, honestly, I'm looking forward to the team moving on from Asamoah. I think he's just kind of lingering and just kind of, I don't know, withering and drying up on this roster. I think he maybe has a chance to go play somewhere else and do some things. I can't really see his days with the Vikings being too much longer. That's just my own personal opinion. But anyway, the end point is maybe Hawks back to the 53. Maybe there's a big trade coming up. Maybe it's for a defensive lineman. Either way, I hope that Redmond is signed back to the practice squad. And we'll see what bottom of the practice squad guy gets released in place of him, if that is the case. So anyway, there's your little bit of Vikings notes. Just kind of bye-week stuff, but some stuff of interest. So we'll get rid of that note, and we'll move on to our power rankings, all right? Pull it on over here. Okay, so just to kind of explain my power rankings, it's this. You're not going to find power rankings like this anywhere else. I don't care. It could be national media, local media, other podcasts. It doesn't matter, because I am not a prisoner of the moment. I don't move teams up and down crazy. Like, for instance, I'll just show you one example right over here. You look at Washington, okay? Washington, I have at 20 right now, and I'll bet a lot of people have Washington maybe in their top 5, maybe in their top 10, because of the last 3 weeks have been really outstanding, and I acknowledge that. Okay, but as little as just 4 weeks ago, because Washington lost their first game, then in the second game, they barely squeaked out a win against the Giants by kicking just field goals the entire game. And so at that point, nobody was even thinking about Washington. Everyone kind of had them just, they had a rookie quarterback. He hadn't really shown much to that point. Everyone basically had them somewhere in the bottom 4 to 6 teams in the NFL. Okay, then all of a sudden the offense gets hot, and for 3 weeks they've looked really great, and now the team's 4-1. Jaden Daniels looks amazing, and he's living up to that number 2 overall pick. And so, you know, people have got them flying. I mean, if you had them anywhere from 26 to 28, you've got them in your top 5 now. It's like, get real, man. You can't do stuff like that. I think by the time they started putting it together in week 3, I had them around 29th, maybe 28th. This week I've got them at 20, so I've got them coming up the board, but it's going to take time. And I don't expect them. And hey, they could prove me wrong. They could win they've already won 4 in a row. They could win another 4 in a row, okay? And at that point, I'm sure they would be in my top 5. But for now, they're at 20. So this is not, my power rankings are not a reflection of the standings. They are not a reflection of who the hottest team right this minute is. This is a reflection of where I thought these teams were to start the year, how they have progressed throughout the season, how they have played against lesser competition, against better competition, how they played on the road, how they played at home. So I'm taking all of these things into account, which is why at the top you won't see a ton of movement, and at the bottom you won't see a ton of movement, and the middle will kind of be interchangeable. But all in all, I think that in terms of just wherever you may look to find a power ranking, I think mine is probably as true and honest as any you're going to find. So anyway, with all of that out of the way, I'll get into it. All right. So looks like my top, 6? Nobody in my top 6 moved. Kansas City, they stayed at 1. Baltimore stayed at 2. Detroit stayed at 3. San Francisco stayed at 4. Philadelphia stayed at 5. Buffalo stayed at 6. And just to take a look real quick at just kind of what those teams did last week, just to kind of catch myself up. So we know that Detroit was on a bye. We know that Philadelphia was on a bye. Okay, we know the Chiefs beat the Saints at home on Monday night. And what does that cover? 4 of them. The 49ers lost a close one to Arizona. They kind of blew a late lead there. And of course you would think, well, why didn't they knock them down? It's like, well, because of the way I am. Yes, they lost at home to a lesser opponent, but I didn't really see anybody else better than them ready to jump up and take their place. I already had Detroit ahead of them, and so what did they do? They had a Thursday night game. They came back. They handled Seattle. I mean, they let Seattle back in the game a little bit, but they were in Seattle. They handled Seattle, and so I still think they look like the team that I think they are. Okay, and so that would explain why I didn't move them. Buffalo, they lost a heartbreaker to Houston. Honestly, they should have had that game. There was some terrible coaching at the end of the game there. Maybe not had it, but at least sent it in overtime, to give themselves a shot. But they totally blew the end of that game. I put that on the coaching. So for now, Buffalo, I mean, Houston is a good team. I think I moved them up just a little bit this week. They're at least top half of the NFL. They're at home. So I think Buffalo at least held their own. And I just saw no reason to really drop them. And I think that about covers everyone. Oh, and then the Ravens won that amazing shootout against Cincinnati. I mean, Lamar, when he turns it on, he is just an MVP. I mean, Lamar is amazing. And the Ravens continue to prove me right. I had them at 2 to start the year. They started out the year 0-2. I held them at 2 because I just knew that they were better than that. And sure enough, they've won 3 in a row, and they've beaten some good opponents. And so they've really proven me right to keep them at 2. So come back over here. Okay, so that kind of explains my top 6, right? So then I have Dallas moving up 1 spot from last week, back up to 7 where they started the year. They had that really tight win against Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. Really impressive win on Sunday night. Green Bay, they are up 1 more spot. They were 9 last week. Now they're 8. They're actually up 4 spots for the year. And Green Bay just continues to impress me. They're just a good, solid, well-coached team. What did they do last week? Beat the Rams in LA, which again, LA, the Rams don't have any home games. I'm sure the Packers filled that stadium, the Packers fans. But still, you got to go on the road. You got to travel to LA. You got to win the game. And the Rams are decimated right now. No Cup, no Nakua. But still a McVay-led team. Stafford, still a really good quarterback. So still a good win for them. So yeah, so I've got Green Bay at 8. All right, so New Orleans, they're starting to fall a little bit now. I got them down 2 from last week. They're at 9, which is actually still up 5 for the year, simply because of that really hot start. Now I realize that they've now lost 3 in a row, punctuated by the Monday night loss to the Chiefs. So now they're 2-3, and they have that injury to Carr. I guess Spencer Rattler's getting the start this week. And I just looking ahead a little bit to the schedule, I see that they're at home against the Buccaneers, and we'll get to this in the pick segment. But I see that the Bucs are actually 3.5 favorites on the road because of probably just because of the slide that New Orleans is on, and also that Rattler's starting the game. But I still have a little bit of faith in the Saints. I still think it's a solid, well-coached veteran team. I don't think Carr will be out too long. I haven't seen any reports that he went on to IR. So for now, I've still got New Orleans kind of clinging to the top 10, but they could start to fall out if their slide continues. Okay, so then we've got our Vikings. We've moved up all the way to 10 now. We started the year at 25. Now we finally made it to the top 10, being 5-0. Of course, people would expect, again, regular guy, why aren't the Vikings in your top 3? I'm like, well, they've got to continue to prove themselves, okay? When you start out as low as 25, I can only move you up so much per week. With each win, they've moved up incrementally, bit by bit, and so here they are at 10. If they were to get a big win against Detroit, who I have number 3 in my rankings, yeah, I could see them potentially getting all the way up to as high as 6 at that point. But we'll see what happens. Again, that's a week away. So for now, we will hold tight at 10. If there's any kind of like big movement in the top 10, I could definitely see myself maybe moving them up one spot during the bye. But for right now, they're at 10, up 3 from last week, up 15 overall for the year. Okay, Cincinnati down 1 from last week. That really tough loss to Baltimore. There were times when it looked like they had that game, and Lamar just proved to be too much for him. And the defense has just not been playing well. The offense has finally turned it on. So there's no concerns there. Chase looks good, Burrow looks good, but that defense that's killing them. So they're off to a 1-4 start, I believe, which is rough. And let's just take a look at who they're playing. They are actually at the Giants, which I think should be a win for them. They are favored by 3.5 on the road. But yeah, the Giants actually look pretty good beating Seattle, so you never know. But I expect the Bengals to bounce back and win that one. Just to confirm, yeah, the Bengals are 1-4, a rough start. So just again, regular guy, why do you have a 1-4 Bengals team at 11? It's like, well, I started them out at 6. Some of their losses haven't been bad losses. I don't consider losing to my number 2 overall team by 3 points late. I don't consider that a bad loss. So, I'm not going to drop a team when they're being competitive, and I still think highly of the roster and the coaching and the quarterback, okay? So anyway, down 1 from last week, down 5 overall on the year. Tampa, they held steady at 12. What'd they do? Oh, that's right. They had the Thursday nighter, lost that. Again, that's another team that should have had that game, man. They let Atlanta steal that one, honestly. So again, a road game, division game, lost it at the last second, kind of a heartbreaker. So I don't see any reason to drop Tampa. So they hold steady. So the Chargers were actually off. They were on a bye, but they're up 1 just because of some of the things that happened around them. So they're up to 13. That actually brings them back to where I had them starting the year. The defense is off to a great start this year. Herbert's starting out a little bit slow. I think Harbaugh's still kind of trying to figure out some things on the offense, but so far so good for the Harbaugh era. They're off to a pretty decent start. If I were to just go look at what the Chargers are doing, I think they might be 2-2, if I remember correctly. Yeah, they're 2-2, so not too bad. All right, back at it. The Rams are now down to 14. I had them dropping 3 this week. They took that loss to the Packers. They continue to slide. So the reason why I kind of have them maybe just slipping a little bit further than, say, a team like Cincinnati is because they're dealing with more injuries. I think more highly. No, actually, that's not true. I do think really highly of McVay over the Bengals coach, whose name slips my mind. But there's just something about what's going on with the Rams. They have a really young team. Both defenses aren't playing well. I would say Burrow's definitely a better quarterback than Stafford, simply because maybe he's a little bit younger. But they're actually pretty even teams, but there's just something going on with the Rams that just feels a little bit more difficult to control, I guess, and that's why I had them just sliding a little bit further. That's a team that I started out number 8 overall in the year. Looks like they were 11 last week. They slid another 3 spots down to 14. And if I were to just go double check on that record of theirs, they are also 1-4. So just a couple of teams there in the Bengals and the Rams that are just starting to slide out. And if they don't watch it, if they lose, another game or two, then they could find themselves in the bottom half of the rankings. So just curious what the Rams are looking at this week. Or do they have the week off? The Rams actually have the week off, so they'll need that time to recoup and maybe get both those receivers back and get back on track, but not against the Vikings, of course. So I think actually that's who they play when they come back from the bye. Or no, let's say we're playing Detroit. So I don't know who they're playing next, but the week after that they're playing us on Thursday night, I believe. So we don't want them to get back on track against us, but anybody else, that's fine. All right. Houston now up to 15, finally moving up beyond where I started them. I started them at 16 to start the year. They didn't really impress me that much to start the year. At one point, when they got blown out by our Vikings, they dropped down to 18. Now I've got them, after a couple of good wins, moving up to 15. So they're up 2 from last week, and they're up 1 for the year. Pittsburgh, I have sliding another. I think that I had them as high as like 13 or 12 at one point, but now they've lost a couple in a row. Justin Fields seems to be kind of the same Justin Fields we've always seen. I love Tomlin as a coach. I love the defense, but there's only so much you can do. So they're at 16. I have them technically up 2 for the year, but down from 1 week, and I think they're going to be kind of in this range all year long. All right, next up we've got Miami continuing their slide. Even though they won, but they beat the Patriots, they still look really out of sorts. I mean, they had to really beg for that win, it felt like. So the Dolphins are a team that I thought highly of coming into the year, but obviously that was a different time. I had them starting the year out at 10. Now they're at 17, down 1 more from last week. So down 7 for the year. And we'll see what's going on with the Dolphins. I don't know if they get Tua back. I don't know if McDaniel's going to turn this thing around. But for right now, things don't look good in Miami, so we'll see what happens. All right, Chicago, we've got them at 18. They're up 2 from last week, but I've got them actually down 3 for the year. Caleb seems to be kind of turning it on. I still think he's extremely inconsistent. He's relying on a good defense and a good run game, which for a young quarterback, that's okay, at least in the early going. He can lean on those things and just not make mistakes, but he does seem a little bit more mistake prone, just because he likes to play a little bit more hero ball, a little bit more loosey-goosey, I guess you could say. So I'm still not really a believer in Chicago, but they did have a really nice, I think it was a blowout win at home against the Panthers. So it's like, but you know what? You need to handle your business, okay? Because every team is an NFL team. So even though the Panthers I have ranked as my 32nd team, you need to blow them out, okay, and prove that you're better than them. And they did that. So we've got a really interesting matchup with them, actually. We'll be waking up real early right on the West Coast here at 6:30 in the morning to watch the Jaguars and the Bears in London. And so, of course, I'm rooting for the Jags in this one. But it'll be an interesting matchup to see what those two teams do, because the Jags are struggling. They finally got off the schneid. We'll get to them in a second. The Bears are starting to roll a little bit. And I'd love to see those two scripts flipped in London if we could. So I'll wake up early to watch that one, because there's definitely intrigue for me as well, I'm sure, as a lot of other Vikings fans. All right, so yeah, let's see, were we on the, no, we're good. Okay, so Chicago, again, they're at 18, up 2 from last week, but down 3 for the year. All right, Atlanta, I had to move them up 2. They're getting hot now. Kirk's really hot. What a great win for them on Thursday night. So they're up 2 from last week, up to 19, but they're still even on the year. Just because it kind of strikes me as a very Kirk team. Just a lot of close games. You win some, you lose some. But, man, I tell you what, he's been really good late. He's putting up really big stats, which is kind of what Kirk does. But he looks a little bit more sharp, mature. I can't quite put my finger on it. I expected him to kind of flounder in Atlanta. He has proven me wrong. He's done really well there so far. If Atlanta gets rolling, they could really start to move up this board. So we'll see. All right. So then we talked about the Commanders earlier. They're at 20 now. They've been kind of skyrocketing up my list with these 3 wins. Actually 4 wins in a row, but 3 impressive wins in a row. Okay, so they're at 20 and up 9 for the year. Okay, Jacksonville's at 21. They're down 2. I think they did win. But I just had to continue to, yeah, they won that close one against the Colts, but man, the way that they nearly blew that in the fourth quarter just kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. It just feels like that's another 1-4 team. I had really had 4 teams that I kind of thought a little bit more highly of to start the year. The Dolphins, the Jaguars, the Rams, the Bengals, who have all really disappointed me so far this year. I expect at least one or a couple of them to kind of bounce back. I don't know if the Jaguars are going to be one of them. They're the team that, for me, has fallen the furthest. Oh, shoot. Hold on. I clicked on something there. Okay. They're all the way down to 21. They're down, even with the win, I slipped them down another 2, and they are down overall 12 on the year. So they're kind of of all the teams that have disappointed me, they're kind of the biggest just slider or whatever you want to call it, simply because Lawrence just doesn't look like he's taken the next step. The offense looks really sloppy. They can't. They really seem to struggle in close games. So I don't really know what to think, but maybe they'll bounce back in London. We'll find out. All right, Seattle, I've got down 4, down to 22, because that loss at home to the New York Giants was despicable. You can't do that. I'm sorry. Especially when it comes to me, because I'm just like not a believer in the Giants, not a believer in Daniel Jones. Yeah, okay, he's looked good for a couple of weeks now, at least better. But I mean, it's like he's been in the league so long now. This is who he is. This is his ceiling. You can't let that guy walk into your house and beat you like that. That was ugly, man. So I knocked Seattle down 4. Then we saw them on Thursday night, lost again. They're 3-3 now. Started out 3-0. They've lost 3 in a row. So we'll see where they end up. But right now they're at 22. I started them at 20, so technically only down 2 for the year. Indianapolis, I had down 1 with that loss to the Jaguars at 23. They're technically down 2 for the year. Arizona, I raised them up 1 with that nice win against San Francisco. They really had to beg and plead to get that win at the end, right? I think a big turnover by the 49ers and just a couple of prayers answered for the Cardinals, and they pulled it out. So I've actually got them up 1 for the week, up 3 overall for the year. All right, Vegas, down 2 finally. I had them holding a steady at 23 for weeks upon weeks, and then finally this last week did them in. Let's see what happened with the Raiders, because I forget. The Raiders, oh yeah, that ugly loss to the Broncos. Minshew got benched. O'Connell's in. Yeah, things don't look good in Vegas. I don't know. I'm hearing reports now that Adams may not get traded, but he's still not happy. So things don't look good in Vegas. They're down 2 for the year and from last week. All right, the Jets, they held steady. They're down 4 overall for the year. That team's in disarray. Their owner is probably the worst owner in the NFL. Rodgers is a complete cancer on that team. Now we'll see what the defense does without Saleh. I don't even know. I haven't thought much of the Jets all year, and I still don't. All right, Denver held steady. They're down 1 for the year. They've actually, Bo Nix is starting to turn it on just a little bit. They had that nice win against the Raiders. It was at home against a team that's struggling, so it doesn't really like move the needle for me that much. I still, at the very least, Caleb Williams will take chances and throw the ball down the field. Bo, I think this might just be who he is. I think he's a dink and dunker. He'll scramble. And I think when it's an obvious wide open guy, he'll chuck it deep. But other than that, he's a very risk adverse kind of a guy, it feels like. And I think that Sean Payton maybe requires a little bit more. I mean, I guess he likes him, but I don't know. I don't see this really going anywhere for Denver, but that's just my opinion. All right, I begrudgingly had to move the Giants up 2 spots, and I have them up 2 for the year, so they're up from 30 to 28. I moved them ahead of Tennessee. Yeah, that's right. I dropped Cleveland. So Tennessee held steady at 29. They were on a bye. Will Levis is your quarterback. I'm sorry. You're just not a good football team. You're down 1 for the year. Cleveland at 30, down another 2. Deshaun Watson is horrible. The defense cannot hold this team up because the offense is so bad. I think they're going to trade off a lot of pieces at the trade deadline, and I think Stefanski might be out. It's not looking good. Cleveland looks like an absolute mess. They are down 6 for the year for me, down 2 from last week. And then you have New England and Carolina holding steady at 31 and 32, like they have pretty much all year long. New England lost that game to Miami. Carolina got blown out by Chicago. They're looking like the teams that we thought they would be, so they'll be drafting high again this year. Okay, so that takes care of the power rankings. Now we can move on to the weekly picks. Okay, let's get into that. So last week was a total flip-flop for me. The week before that, I had an ugly early window and then a great late window. This last week, my early window was phenomenal, and then my late window got ugly, and it actually ruined my Fermented Five too. I had my high hopes there for a minute, especially when Miami squeaked out their win. I was like, oh, am I onto something here? But then no. So anyway, I ended week 5, 46 and 32 straight up. 43 and 35 against the spread. My week 5, in particular, 9 and 5 straight up, 7 and 7 against the spread. I went 3 and 2 in my Fermented 5. So my Fermented 5 is 14 and 11 on the year, and hopefully we can start doing a little better. I haven't really had a bad week per se. I think my worst week was week 2 when I went 8 and 8 straight up. 7 and 9 against the spread, and 1 and 4 my Fermented 5. It's basically my worst week. But overall, if I'm not picking well, I'm at least picking kind of like, a little bit above 500 or right at 500. So far, I would say I'm off to a pretty good start this year. So if you watched my last show, I did slip in my pick for the Thursday night game. I said San Francisco would win and cover. They were 4-point favorites against Seattle on Thursday night, and I believe they won by 12. So that was good. So I'm off to a good start. 1-0 in both, which puts me at 47 and 32 straight up, 44 and 35 against the spread. So we're doing okay there. That game was not a part of my Fermented 5, so now we'll go ahead and do our picks. First up, we have the Jaguars at the Bears in London. This line actually moved when I first looked at it. The Bears were actually favored by 1.5. Now it's actually Jaguars favored by 1 point. My spread came out Bears by 1 point. So it looks like I've got the Bears taking the point and winning the game. All right, next up we've got Cardinals at the Packers. Packers favored by 5.5 at home. My spread came out Packers by 6, so I just barely have the Packers. I do have them winning, and I have them barely covering that 5.5. So look for the Packers to win by at least 6. Next up, you have Colts at Titans. This should be a shit show. The Titans are favored miraculously by 2.5 at home. I swear, Flacco gets no respect, man. He looked great last week, too. My spread actually came out Titans by 3, so another tight one. The Titans will win. The Titans will cover the 2.5. All right. Skipping that one, here's a nice divisional matchup. We have Buccaneers at Saints with Rattler at quarterback for the Saints. So the Saints are actually underdogs by 3.5 at home. My spread actually came out because I'm still a slight believer in the Saints. I came back New Orleans by 2, so I actually have the Saints taking those points and winning the game. All right, so we'll see what Rattler does. I've got faith in the kid. He's got some confidence. We'll see what happens. All right, not that one. Here we go. Chargers at Broncos. Broncos underdogs by 3 at home to the Chargers. My spread came out 8.5 in favor of the Chargers, which means that I have the Chargers winning on the road and covering that 3-point spread. Okay, then we have, this is a juicy matchup, man. I can't wait to watch this one. We have the Lions at the Cowboys. Cowboys getting no respect, even with that comeback win against the Steelers last week. Cowboys underdogs by 3.5 at home. My spread came out with a measly 0.5 point in favor of Detroit, so I do think the Lions will win, but I do believe that the Cowboys will cover that spread. Okay, next up we have Falcons at Panthers. The Falcons are finally getting an easy matchup. They have had probably the most brutal schedule so far this year. So they're going to go on the road to the Panthers, and the Panthers are underdogs by 6 at home. I've got my spread came out Falcons by 4, which means actually I do have the Falcons winning, but I do have the Panthers covering. So that's an interesting one. We'll see if that happens. All right, and then finally we have the Bengals at the Giants, and the Giants 3.5 underdogs at home. My spread came out 6.5 in favor of the Bengals, so I have the Bengals both winning and covering the spread on the road. Okay, now let's get to the Fermented Five, shall we?
Fermented Five.
All right, let's do this Fermented Five, guys. Bring it back. All right, first up of the Fermented Five is the Houston Texans at the New England Patriots. Now, the Patriots are underdogs by 6.5 points at home. My spread came out Texans by 12.5, which means I have the Texans winning the game and then also covering that spread by a touchdown or so. This is my biggest spread, maybe of the year. I'm not sure. But when you have the Eagles coming off a bye and getting healthy against a just fading Browns team, we got Browns at Eagles. Oddly enough, this line moved too. It started out Eagles favored by 9.5 at home. It's now moved to 8.5. So it looks like some money's going on to the Browns. But my spread came out a whopping 30 points in favor of the Eagles. So clearly, I have the Eagles winning this, and I have the Eagles running away with it and winning it by three or four touchdowns, easily covering the 8.5. So we'll see. Hopefully, I don't think I got that line though. We'll take a look at the bet slip, but I think I got mine at minus 9.5. All right, the next one, third game. Bold of me to go with this one. We have the Commanders at the Ravens. The Ravens favored by 7 at home, even with how hot the Commanders are right now. And I think I noticed that Brian Robinson's going to miss the game, the running back for the Commanders. But my spread came out Ravens by 18, which means I think the Ravens will win. I think they'll cover the 7, and maybe bring the Commanders down to earth a little bit. Who knows? But we'll see. We'll see. That's going to be a really good game. There's a lot of really. I love it when during a Vikings bye week, there's a lot of really good matchups worth watching. So I'm really looking forward to a great day of football and not having the Vikings be my main focus, where I can just kind of flip around and watch Red Zone and check everything out. You know, kind of get up on some of these different teams. All right, fourth game in the Fermented Five. We have Steelers at Raiders. Raiders underdogs by 3 at home. I think the Steelers should probably win this one pretty easily. My spread came back Steelers by 10, which is a spread of 7 for me. So Steelers going to win, Steelers going to cover. And then finally, the fifth game is the discombobulated Jets at home against the Buffalo Bills. Jets 2.5 underdogs at home. Lots and lots and lots of home dogs this week. A really interesting betting week for sure. I wished I had. I'll show you in a minute, but I wished I had more money. I didn't have any more money in the budget for gambling, so I was only able to put about $6 down. Anyway, my spread came back Buffalo by 14, so I have Buffalo winning and covering the 2.5, winning by like a touchdown and the field goal, more or less. So that completes the Fermented Five. Like I said, if you take a look at these numbers, I'm off to a pretty good start, straight up and against the spread. And I'm doing so-so on the Fermented Five. I had one perfect week, and I'd really love to get another one. So there's your Fermented Five. We did the picks. We did the Fermented Five. Let me just show you the bet slip right quick. Here, we'll come back to me. Let me bring up my browser. We'll switch it over to the bet slip. Bring it over. Okay, here's my bet slip. So, yeah, I was only able to put $5.90. That's all I had left in my Bovada account. So I took the $5.90. I put it down. I did my 5. I got the Texans minus 6.5, the Eagles minus 9.5, the Ravens minus 6.5, the Steelers minus 3, and the Bills minus 2.5. And if I happen to go 5-0, I will win an extra $137.80, which that'd cover me for 6-7 weeks. So I'll take it. Let's see if we can get it, because I could really use a little bit of extra money in my Bovada account, because I'm down to 0 now. So anyway. All right, so that finishes that. So now it's time. Where are we at? 35 minutes. Perfect. This is a great time to talk about the trade deadline. So we're going to bring it back to me. I'm going to pull up my spreadsheet with all of my trade deadline notes. And I've noticed, I mean, with the bye week, right? It's slow news, so everybody is coming out with a trade deadline show. Even though the trade deadline is still what 3+ weeks away, but everyone's got ideas, everyone's got players, and I've got my own ideas and players, and I'm going to give them to you now. So I just want to start it off by saying, um, there have been a lot of names being floated out there, either by the national media or the local media or casual podcasters or various Vikings related articles I've come across while on Google. And so I'm going to go through as many names as I saw or found, and I'm going to explain. My first list is going to be guys I don't think we're going to pursue or have a shot at. The first two guys I want to talk about are Quinnen Williams of the Jets. These are both defensive tackles. Quinnen Williams of the Jets and Jeffrey Simmons of the Titans. Simmons in particular has been a really hot name. But basically, these are two very high-end defensive tackles, okay, who are young. They're centerpieces of their current teams, and it would take a first-round pick to pry them away from their team. And my point is that there is one other defensive tackle out there who is actually worth the first round pick. These guys, in my opinion, aren't worth it. So I don't really see the point in kind of messing around and throwing around a first round pick on guys that are good but not great. You want to use first rounders on greatness, okay? And so that would be Dexter Lawrence. I have actually been kind of, I don't know, dismissing that rumor a little bit, but it won't go away. So I finally just had to say, okay, what if we really are willing to part with the first round pick for Dexter Lawrence, and what would the Giants' motivation be to trade him? And I actually came up with the reason, and so I actually put him as a part of the 6 players that I think we could trade for. So with that guy kind of maybe being in our sights, I don't think guys like Quinnen Williams or Jeffrey Simmons are nearly as good as he is, and I don't think they're worth our time. They're definitely not worth our first round pick, so I've got them as no. Okay, a guy who I actually thought, this was my own, this didn't come from anybody else. I thought maybe we could look at DeForest Buckner with the Colts. I identified him, but after, and this is something maybe I haven't told you guys about yet, but just like I have explained about what the regular guy does, is I come up with my own formulas and metrics and ways of kind of figuring things out that are different than the way that everybody else does it, okay? And I've come up with my own model for how I I come up with what I believe a player's trade value is. And so I used this when I looked at every player. I used this model. And so, for instance, with DeForest Buckner being a very good player that he is, he actually came out as a first round trade value evaluation for me. And so I'm not going to pay, I would want my team to pay that high of a price for a 30-year-old defensive tackle, even though he's playing at such a high level still. He's, I think he's got a contract for maybe a couple more years that pays him, like a top 10 guy. And so I wouldn't see the point of going after a 30-year-old defensive tackle and giving up a first-round pick for him. So I marked Buckner off my own personal list. Okay, a guy I saw floated, somebody named Adam Butler. He plays for the Raiders. He's a Jag, just a guy. We're trying to fortify the defensive line. We're not trying to dilute the talent pool and spread more snaps around. So a guy like that, we're not looking for depth. We're looking for impact. So a name like that, I don't really care. Okay, we got DJ Jones, another defensive tackle. This guy plays for Denver. He's a talented pass rusher, but we're looking for more of a run stopper, or at least a guy who can play both ways, kind of a two-down guy. I just don't feel like he's a scheme fit, and I'm not even sure the Broncos are sellers anyway. I think that they're really happy with the way their defense is playing, so I don't see Jones really being on our radar. I saw Khalil Mack's name out there, and I've actually got another thing I'm going to talk about later about Dallas Turner's snaps being blocked right now by Patrick Jones. And so if you were to bring in a guy like Khalil Mack, you could even start taking snaps away from Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. We don't want that. The way the team's playing right now is just it's going really really smooth. And I think again, in addition, at defensive tackle. Could really fortify the way that the rotations work and stuff. But a guy like Khalil Mack, he's a 33-year-old pass rusher. Yes, he's off to a great start this year. But we don't want to screw up our rotations. We don't want to continue to block Turner's development. So I don't even think the Chargers are sellers anyway. So Khalil Mack, he's off the list. Okay, a couple of linebackers I saw thrown out there. Jerome Baker of Seattle, like an inside linebacker. He's a nice player. He's having a good year. He's on a reasonable 1-year free agent contract with the Seahawks. I don't see why they'd be selling. Yes, they've lost 3 in a row, but I think they still see themselves as contenders for at least a wild card spot, maybe even for the division. Who knows? And so I just don't see why they'd be selling off a defensive piece. In addition to that, we appear to be pretty set at inside linebacker this year. Cashman and Pace are playing really well. Camus has come in and played really well when he's been called upon. So I just don't really see. I don't really see this guy being even available and even necessary for the way our team's constructed. Another inside linebacker I saw thrown out was a guy named Raekwon McMillan from the Patriots. Maybe some of these guys had some former Flores connections, and maybe that's why some of these names were thrown out. But again, just another Jag. It's like he'd be a depth guy. It's like maybe if we're looking to replace Asamoah with somebody more competent, sure, but otherwise not even really worth talking about. Doesn't even move the needle. All right, so I saw cornerback J.C. Horn of the Panthers. I saw his name floated out there. He is 23 years old, and he is in his, I think he's in his 4th year now. He was I think a top 10, like a number 8 overall pick for the Panthers a few years ago. So he's still under team control in 2025 if they choose to pick up his option. And yes, I do agree that Carolina could be sellers of the deadline, no doubt. But I think they're really trying to build something there, and I think they've already started. And I think that Horn is a part of that rebuild. Especially when you're talking about a guy who's kind of like young and improving year on year. I don't think he's off to a great start this year, but when you look at his PFF scores, they've improved year upon year, heading into this year. So that just doesn't look like a guy that the Panthers would just be willing to part with, especially, when you consider that, what are you even going to fetch for him? I mean, if you're asking for a first-round pick, I doubt anyone sends you that. I doubt anyone even sends you a second. I think you'd be lucky to get a third for him. That's not worth it, for a guy who's still so young and so talented and maybe still on the rise. So I don't see him being available or an option for us. All right, so a name I've seen floating around quite a bit and for a while has been Marshawn Lattimore. And I can see why the Saints, for good reason, are trying to move him, because for the money they're paying him, they're not getting the production. I went back and looked at some of his statistics, and for a corner, maybe it's because he's not being thrown at. I don't know. He's only got 1 interception in each of the last 2 seasons, and I think he tops out at maybe 8 passes defensed a year, which is like 1 every 2 games. Maybe his PFF scores are really good, and maybe he just doesn't get tested. I don't know, but he's starting to get up there in age, and he's being paid handsomely, and so my chart showed him at being about a mid-third round value, and to be honest, with the amount of money he's being paid, I don't think it'd be worth the draft capital and to take on the contract to disrupt our current defensive back room. I don't think he really improves it that much. I mean, I think probably if you brought in a guy like that, you would have Lattimore and Gilmore on the outside, Murphy on the inside with Shaq and Fabian Moreau kind of backing up on the outside. And it probably hurts, either a Caleb or McLaughlin's ability to even be on the 53. But anyway, I don't see it happening. That's a no for me. Sure, the name sounds great, but I don't think so. For some reason, I saw center Joe Tippmann of the Jets out there. Can't really see any reason why the Jets would punt on a 23-year-old second-year player in his rookie contract who appears to be ascending as a piece of their future offensive line. So that's that's kind of a come on man for me. I don't even know why Joe Tippmann's name is out there. I can't see the Jets offering him in a trade. Okay, right guard Brandon Sheriff from Jacksonville. He is a great player, and he's been one of the best guards in football for years, which means his value is very high. I had his grade come out as a mid-second rounder, which I think is a little bit too rich for our blood. When you consider it's simply just an upgrade, and you're taking on there's other needs on the team. Yes, you're trying to upgrade right guard if you think that Ingram sucks ass, which some people do. Obviously, I defend him a little bit. I acknowledge he still has his issues. Yes, it'd be great to have Brandon Sheriff, but for me, I really wouldn't want to send off that third round comp pick for a guard. And it's like he's already, 33, 34 years old. You wouldn't have him for very long. His play could drop off. It just seems like too much of a risk for a guy who's just going to be a little bit too expensive in terms of draft capital and money this late in his career. And just to talk a little bit about, because this was something that was kind of confusing for me too, was the comp picks haven't even been allocated yet, right? They're all kind of just projected at this point. So when I was hearing other people talk about, yeah, you can just trade your comp pick, I'm like, no, you can't. We don't even own it yet. Well, as it turns out, I did some research. If both teams agree to the trade, like if they've looked at the data or the research or whatever, and they see that comp pick as being kind of a guaranteed thing, which for ours, we're basically getting like the highest comp pick. We're going to get like the first comp pick of the third round because of the Cousins free agency loss. As long as both teams agree to the trade, you can actually trade a projected comp pick in advance. So that is a thing. So you can use that when talking about the trade deadline. So in case anybody was wondering that, I figured that one out for you. So Brandon Sheriff is going to be a no from me. But there's another guy who actually is a yes, so we'll get to him. Here's a guy whose name has been just bandied about, and I'm kind of like, why? Amari Cooper. That's a luxury suggestion. He's clearly a very talented player, kind of, being squandered in Cleveland because Watson's just so bad. He could clearly need the change of scenery. He could clearly use the change of scenery. But we're just so solid at wide receiver. I mean, you have the best receiver in the NFL in Jefferson. You have a very good complement piece to him in Jordan Addison. And you have a young guy in Jalen Nailor who is finally starting to blossom. And with the way he is starting to perform, like he's finally healthy, he's getting his chance to be on the field, he's performing like we all thought he could. Why would you want to block him and render him back to the fourth or fifth receiver, put him on the bench with a guy like Amari Cooper who's good, but I'm not so sure that Cooper right now is better than Nailor right now. I mean, Cooper's he's on his way down and Nailor's on his way up. So I just don't see the point of bringing in a guy like Cooper when you have Nailor at 3, and I've already talked about Powell at 4. You can't do any better than Powell at 4 because he's so clutch. Anytime you need a big catch, anytime you need a first down, he's great on punt return. He's so reliable. There's nobody you want more as your wide receiver 4 than Brandon Powell. There's no need. And then your fifth guy is Sherfield, who is just a good, solid blocking wide receiver and special teamer. So there's no need to disrupt this wide receiver room. It's good. It's solid. So that's a no for me on Amari Cooper. I saw Adam Thielen, of course, which is just, that'd be a feel-good addition. He's 34 years old, okay? He's toast. I'm sorry. He chose to go close out his career in Carolina for the money. Nailor is better than Thielen. I mean, it might be a toss-up with Amari. He's clearly better than Thielen right now. So there is just, for me, it's just, there's no way this is happening. Adam's not coming back to Minnesota. Sorry, guys. Van Jefferson, I saw. Another guy that has a former Flores or O'Connell connection or something. I think Van Jefferson played for the Rams when O'Connell was there. The thing is, we already have Brandon Powell, and I think Van Jefferson's kind of like a light version of Brandon Powell. So he plays for Pittsburgh now. That's a no from me. No, he's just a Jag. No on Jefferson. Okay, Nick Chubb. Great player, big name, but I'm not looking for a guy to steal carries from Jones. I'm looking for a guy to complement Jones, to give Jones a rest. I want Jones to be the number one guy. I don't want him to be 1A and 1B with Nick Chubb. And I don't even know what the Browns would be asking. I think they'd be asking for something really high, like our first or a second, because of just how great he's been in his career. No doubt, I appreciate that. I get all that. But he's coming off a very serious knee injury. I think he's getting close to returning, but it's just a no thanks. I think that Nick Chubb could be a great addition for somebody else, but not for us. Tony Pollard, I thought was an interesting. And I guess this one came from Doogie on the Score North reckless speculation segment or whatever. And I guess a lot of people within the Vikings building really like Pollard. Maybe they had considered him in free agency. But the thing is that I don't know if I've ever seen a guy sign a multi-year free agent contract in March and then literally get traded 7 months later at the deadline. I mean, if it happens, I mean, he would be a nice complimentary piece, but when you just consider the fact that he literally just signed a 3-year deal with Tennessee, I don't really see any reason for them to be looking to move him already. So I had to put him on the no list because that just seems a little bit too far-fetched, even if the Vikings do like him. Now, if the Vikings make a call on him and the Titans say, well, you can have him for this, and they say, okay, then, maybe it happens. And then Pollard would be a Viking, and I think he would be an excellent, excellent addition to the roster. But as of right now, I don't see it happening. Okay, just a couple more of these guys, a couple more of the no's, a couple more running backs. So we've got... Excuse me, hold on. Ooh, that came out of nowhere. All right, Javonte Williams with the Broncos. I think the rumors of his demise during the offseason were clearly exaggerated because he's honestly the only real talented running back the Broncos have right now on their roster. So I can't really see why they would ditch him now, now that he's kind of like re-proven himself. He seems to be a pretty important piece of Sean Payton's offense. The Broncos seem to be maybe making a move to at least contend for a playoff spot in the AFC if Bo Nix continues to get a little better each week. The defense is playing great. They can run the ball. So I don't see the Broncos looking to move Javonte Williams. And then finally, I saw Travis Etienne's name out there, the Jaguars running back. Here's another guy kind of like J.C. Horn. This guy, Etienne, is 25, super versatile. He's coming off of back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons after missing his rookie year, at least either all of it or most of it. And they still have him under team control if they choose to, exercise his option for 2025. So it would be at a very reasonable price, right? Because you're just talking running back here, so it'd just be like, I don't know, $5, $6, $7 million. I mean, for a guy as talented as Etienne, that's a steal. So I'm not seeing a reason for Jacksonville to do this. I think even though they're struggling and off to a 1-4 start, I think they still really love the talent that they have on offense. I think they still really love their quarterback. And so I just don't see why they would just start punting away good young players now. Okay? So that does it for all the guys that I said no to. Here are the guys I am saying yes to, and I have 6 of them. Now, I'm not saying that we need to acquire all 6 of them. I'm just saying these are 6 guys that are on my radar that I think we should go after, and I have put them in order of importance in terms of what I think is the most important for our team. Okay, the number one guy that I think we should pursue is Dalvin Tomlinson, defensive tackle with the Browns. He's a player that we're familiar with. He was with us in 2022. He's 325 pounds. He can play the nose. He can allow Harrison Phillips to shift out to a defensive end spot. I love Harrison Phillips. I know he likes to play the nose. He cannot handle double teams. Period. If you look at Harrison Phillips and the way he plays against double teams, and you compare it to the way that Taki Taimani looks, Harrison Phillips can't be that guy anymore. I'm sorry. So we need a big, beefy guy like Tomlinson to play the middle, okay? Just a perfect fit, a nice 2-down guy to help us stop the run, and he really improves the defensive line rotation if they were to kind of utilize it the way I think that they could or would. So why would Cleveland do this? Well, the Browns appear to have whiffed badly on Deshaun Watson, and the defense can really only carry so much garbage. Okay, and so far not so good because the garbage is pretty heavy. So I think the chances of this team just getting completely demoed in prep for a total rebuild are very, very high. I think they're just gonna at some point this year, maybe at the end of the year, I think they're just gonna cut Watson and eat all that money and just like be done with it. I think Stefanski's gone, whole new coaching staff, whole new quarterback, whole new team. So I think they start selling off pieces. I think they might be the biggest sellers at the trade deadline. We'll see how the next couple of weeks go. Maybe they make a small run. I don't know. But Tomlinson, I'd like us to go after him. So what's the impact? I could see the two down linemen. So in our 3-4, I could see it being Jonathan Bullard, Dalvin Tomlinson, Harrison Phillips as our three, okay? Then on third down and long yardage situations, when we bring in the four-man front, we could do Dallas Turner, Jerry Tillery, Jihad Ward, Jonathan Grenard. And you could even, you may notice Van Ginkel's name missing from that four. Well, you could move him to inside linebacker. I have been pounding the table for Cashman to have his snaps lowered this year because he has played 333 snaps in 5 games, which is 66 a game. He is going to get worn down. We cannot keep playing him like this. We need to find ways for Cashman to get off the field so we can, have him at his tip-top, performance when he is on the field. Get him down to like 50, 55 at least, So on third downs and long yardage situations, I think you could drop Van Ginkel into shallow coverage or deep coverage, because I have talked about this, and I am gonna next week I'm gonna chop up a video. I've already gone through and picked out all the plays. I just got to create the video of just where I think Cashman really struggles in this defense, and where I think that we need to really kind of either take him out or help him out. And so I just think in these situations where we have the four-man front, let Van Ginkel come in, let him play the middle, let him play the deep cover, because I think Cashman really struggles with deep coverage. I think once he gets beyond like 15 yards into coverage, he really looks lost and doesn't know what he's doing. He's really great in shallow coverage. When he's within like 5, 10, 15 yards, like he plays really well in that area, but once he gets beyond that, not good. So let Van Ginkel play in those situations. So that's how I feel like it'll affect the rotations and what guys you'll see on the field in what situations. And I think it would really improve our defense, even more so than they're already playing. All right, so money, he's 30. He's into the second year of a 4-year free agent contract he signed with Cleveland. The average annual value is $14.25 million, which is probably why we didn't re-sign him, because that's a really nice offer. But you know what? We're going to need a guy next year anyway, because Jerry Tillery's on a 1-year deal. Jihad Ward's on a 1-year deal. Jonathan Bullard's on a 1-year deal. We're going to need at least a little bit more along the defensive line heading into 2025. So you bring in Tomlinson and you have him for another year or two. And, maybe at that point, maybe going into 2026 when he's 32 years old, you can start to have a renegotiation or a restructuring or whatever, maybe even cut him at that point. We don't know. But I think bringing Tomlinson in, having him for 2 years, I think would be smart. So the trade value I came up with, I had Tomlinson's value come in just based on his age and how much money he's making and his production. I had him at a mid-4th round value. And I think we could get away with offering. So right now we own 2/5. The 1/5, of course, we own is ours. The other 5th that we own actually is Cleveland's, which came over from the Zadarius Smith trade that we made a couple maybe last offseason, the season before. Anyway, so we could potentially get away with offering Cleveland's 5th back to them. That'd be about right in terms of value. Or if we didn't want to part with that one and we wanted to use our own 5th, which would obviously be much lower, maybe like by about 20 picks, maybe we could do like a little pick swap in 2026 to kind of even things out. Of course, as you know, what's the GM's name there in Cleveland? Is it Barry, something Barry? Kwesi used to work with that guy and actually talks about him in terms of just like being a mentor and kind of helping him raise him up in the game. So that's a really good connection there. So I think that those guys could really work. They understand what each other expect in a value, or what kind of value to expect in terms of a trade between the two of them, and so they could hash something out. So that's my number one target is Dalvin Tomlinson. All right, we're already at an hour, so it looks like we're going to go a little beyond. So let's get to number two. My number two free agent target is running back Raheem Mostert from Miami. I think that adding Mostert to Aaron Jones would propel our run offense to even greater heights. It would shift Chandler back to like special teams duties. He could even maybe play on like coverage teams and stuff, and just let Jones and Mostert roll at running back. Mostert is really great in short yardage. He's really great near the goal line. He's just a good, solid, dependable veteran running back. And he adds that depth and that Jones insurance that we need. So why would Miami do it? Well, Mostert is an aging running back. He's quickly approaching, if not maybe already at the running back cliff. This could be his last quality year, honestly. He's 32 years old. The Dolphins are starting to fade. They look a little bit out of sorts. And Achane and then that young kid, Jalen Wright, who just kind of popped last week in that win over the Patriots, he's suddenly emerging. So the running back room suddenly looks kind of full. And I think Mostert's carries are going to start to really, shrink. And so I think this would be an opportunity for a guy to kind of maybe like chase a ring and still give a team, good quality play. So I think that Mostert could definitely be available. So the impact is going to be, I think Mostert is a proven veteran running back. He's 32, yes, but he does still appear to have gas left in the tank, at least for this season. He's a physical runner, and he's just a guy who knows how to, pick up first downs and get in the end zone. And he's such a great, I've noticed that he's a great change of pace guy. Like you'll notice one running back like really kind of getting hot, and then you'll think, oh, when the other guy comes in, it's not going to be the same. He'll be hot too. Like they'll just be hot on top of hot. And if you can have Jones hot and Mostert hot simultaneously, I mean, the running game could be fantastic. So I just think he's a clear upgrade over Chandler. Chandler, I've talked about. I like him at times, but a lot of times he leaves a lot of yards on the field. He doesn't always hit the correct hole. He doesn't always put his foot in the ground and move it to the outside when he should. And I don't trust him in short yardage situations, so I would definitely consider Mostert a huge upgrade over Chandler, at least right now. All right, so money. He's been extended through 2025, but it's only at around $4 million this year and next year. So that's a pretty damn good value, honestly. If he falls off the cliff, at the end of this year or during the offseason or whatever, the June 1st, release date going into next offseason, if you cut him before June 1st, the dead money is only $1 million. So there's like literally no risk here. And then the trade value, my trade value chart actually showed him being valued as a late third rounder. That's a bit much in my opinion. But if you get away with not giving up the Cleveland fifth for Tomlinson, if you're trying to get both of these guys, I'd prefer not to use the comp pick on a running back, but I would definitely try and use that Cleveland fifth to try and get Mostert. And maybe Miami goes for it because maybe they're just looking to kind of acquire some draft capital going into the next year. You don't know. So it's worth just throwing the offer out there. Maybe you try and sweeten it a little bit by throwing in a day 3 2026 pick. Who knows? Maybe you throw in a player. I don't know. But I estimate the Cleveland pick in 2025, the Cleveland fifth I talked about, will be around pick 145 or so. And I think Mostert's value came in somewhere around 100. So, it's about a round and a half difference. So we'll see if we actually do look at Mostert. We'll see if they'll go for it. We'll see what we're willing to part with and what we offer. All right, the number 3 guy I've got. If we can't get Mostert, I think we should definitely look at Miles Sanders. He's a running back with the Panthers right now. He's another veteran running back that I think we should go after if we can't get Mostert. You saw what Sanders could do when used properly in Philadelphia, right? He was a part of a Super Bowl, not winning team, but they went to the Super Bowl. He's just wasted in Carolina. I mean, it's like they're not doing anything with him. He'd be a great addition to our team because we have playoff aspirations. And again, he's shown what he can do on playoff teams. So He'd be a nice addition for our team. Why would Carolina do it? It's Carolina. I mean, they have to overspend on free agents to get players to come to them, which they clearly did with Miles Sanders. I mean, you don't have to really pay astronomical money for running backs. Even a guy like Barkley, Saquon, who went to Philly. I mean, I don't even think he got much more than, I don't know, it couldn't have been more than like 15 million bucks a year, right? Which is like, that's when you compare that to what other positions get. I mean, guards are getting 20 plus million. So the running back position isn't really being overpaid that much, but they did technically overpay for a guy of Sanders' quality. He's a good change of pace guy, a good third down guy, but not a starter. They paid him starter money. He's not a starter. Okay, so they overpay for Sanders. I think that they're probably going to want to continue to build the roster, move off of veterans, bring in younger guys. So that means getting more draft picks, more draft capital. So, get rid of those contracts, and that maybe they signed out of desperation at the time because they're like, we just need a running back, who's the first guy we can get. But anyway, they just want to recoup some draft capital, start to rebuild this team, get some more youth and things like that. So that's why Carolina would do it. The impact, I think that Sanders would be a really nice compliment to Jones. He's a proven commodity. He's shown what he can do. He can come in on third downs. He can catch passes. He's good on screens. And he can even, I think, take on full drives if Jones needs a break for an entire drive. And he can be competent. And he's still only 27, so he's not nowhere near the cliff yet. Okay, money. He is into the second year of a 4-year deal. He's at 6.35 average annual value, which is just a 2/3 of a million less than what Jones is making. So we can absorb that pretty easily, I think. He'd cost $3 million to cut before June 1st next year. But honestly, he might be a nice addition to the running back room. I mean, you've got him for a couple years if you want him. He's not being paid too much. So, maybe you hang on to him. Who knows? And then finally, his trade value, I came out as an early 4th rounder. So again, if you can't get Miami to go for that Cleveland 5th for Mostert, maybe Carolina will take the Cleveland 5th for Sanders. But either way, I think you should probably be able to get at least one of these two guys with that Cleveland 5th. And I wouldn't. Don't worry, I've got a way for us to recoup some draft capital of our own a little bit later here. But I don't want to use the 3rd round comp on either one of these guys. Not for a running back. So again, maybe if you want to sweeten just a tad, if you're only going to offer the 5th, maybe you throw in a day 3, like a 6th or 7th in 2026. Maybe that'll get it done. So we'll see. Okay, number 4 on my list, we have the big name, Dexter Lawrence, the defensive tackle from the Giants, who tore us up in week 1. So I've been poo-pooing this idea of Dexter Lawrence even being available since his name come up. But it just won't go away, and I'm not sure why. So I had to really look into it. I think the only reason I could see for New York moving this guy is if they were trying to acquire a second first-round pick so that they could then make a move for a quarterback in the 2025 draft, okay? So again, why would New York do it? Well, like I just said, if the plan is to move on from Daniel Jones, which it should be, if they plan to continue with Daboll as their coach and Joe Shane as their GM, then they definitely want to bring in their own guy, a spanking brand new young quarterback, fresh out of the 2025 draft, right? How do you get that guy? Well, you're probably going to suck at least a little bit this year, right? So you might get a pick somewhere around 10. Then if you acquire that second first-round pick, then you can attempt to make a move up the board and really go get your guy, okay? And now who is a chip on their team worthy of getting a first-round pick? Well, this is the guy. I don't know if there's anybody else on their team worthy of a first-round pick. Dexter Lawrence could literally be the one piece of their roster who could be a catalyst for them getting the quarterback that they want in next year's draft. So that's the only reason why I think Lawrence could be available. And that would also depend on us being willing to part with our number 1 pick to get him, okay? But yeah, so anyway, so the impact. If you add Dexter Lawrence to this defense, we are officially in the conversation for the best defense in the NFL. Maybe not even in the conversation, maybe dominating the conversation. And then we would have to be considered major contenders for the Super Bowl at that point. He adds that much value to the defensive line and the defense. He is that great of a player. Money we'd be taking on a lot, but he is a 26-year-old stud, all-pro level player. He's in the first year of a 4-year deal that pays him an average annual value of $21.9 million. Which, when you consider his level of talent, I mean, we're actually giving Grenard $19 million a year, and Grenard's a very good edge defender, but he's not like a top 5 edge defender. I mean, Dexter Lawrence is like quite possibly the best defensive tackle in all of football. So, at $22 million a year, I would say that's actually kind of a good deal for him. And then the trade value, clearly, we'd be trading our 2025 first-round pick for this guy. The Giants might even ask for a little more. Who knows? And maybe we throw in a player. Maybe we throw in, I don't know, somebody like Brian Asamoah or Caleb Evans. I don't know if they'll even take him, but maybe they need more depth. But who knows? We lack picks, so if we were going to send anything extra, it'd have to be a player or something from the 2026 draft. But would it be worth it? I'm not sure. But Dexter Lawrence definitely is a huge impact player, and he definitely moves the needle in the right direction for our team. So I had him at number 4. I mean, obviously, in terms of talent, he's number 1, but I have him on number 4 on my list simply because it's really difficult to part with the number 1 pick, no matter who the player is, unless it's like Tom Brady in his prime or something. All right, so number 5 is right guard Wyatt Teller of Cleveland. This one, again, is entirely my idea. I haven't seen his name anywhere else. And it wouldn't actually happen for a few weeks because he is 2 games into a short-term IR stint right now. So a lot of whether or not he even becomes an option depends on the next couple of games. Does he get healthy in time? Does his practice window open? And what happens with Ingram? Does he continue to play kind of the way he's been playing, where there's enough mistakes where the team is like, you know what? We need to really settle this interior offensive line if we really want to make a potential Super Bowl run. So, why would Cleveland do it? Where's my mouse? There it is. Why would Cleveland do it? Well, like I said, I think that the Browns are close to fully demoing the whole franchise down to the ground. Wyatt Teller is a really good player. He's approaching 30 years old, and he has a year plus left on his contract, and he's being paid handsomely, 14.2 average annual value. So the impact, like I said in my last episode, is that I consider moves along the offensive line to be risky just due to continuity, right? Because the 5 guys we have now have been playing together for quite some time. The only way that it makes sense to make a move, you can't just kind of like do like a side-to-side kind of a thing where you get a guy on like maybe equal footing with Ingram. It has to be a stud veteran who is a plug-and-play guy and can immediately just step right in and be great on your offensive line. And Wyatt Teller would be that kind of a player. He's played like I think top 10 guard in the league for several years now. So right now, in terms of money, he's in the 3rd year of a 4-year extension that he signed with Cleveland. That was his first, big money contract after his rookie deal, which, he also was drafted by Cleveland. So he's been in Cleveland his whole career. So we would absorb a lot of financial responsibility with him. Again, 14.2 average annual value. And there are even bigger cap numbers coming up, and there are also 3 void years. So it's up to the Vikings to decide how important improving the interior offensive line truly is, because if you go after a guy like Teller, you're going to be taking on a lot of financial responsibility, but he's definitely a guy who I think could be available simply because the Browns are going to be sellers. He's getting a little bit older, approaching 30. He makes a lot of money. He seems like an obvious candidate for them to kind of get rid of, and maybe we're the team to come calling. Okay, so the trade value, just based on his age, based on the amount of money that we'd have to be taking on, his trade value obviously takes a hit. And so I could actually see the trade being Wyatt Teller for Ed Ingram straight up, because Ingram is in the 3rd year of a 4-year rookie contract, so the Browns would have Ingram under control the remainder of this year, and then also next year, as they try and rebuild their team, they would have a starting right guard, at least a capable starting right guard. So, again, another trade possibility where you send maybe a sweetener from 2026. There's only so many of those you can do, right? Because it's like there's only so much draft capital to go around. But we don't have anything beyond the 5th round. I certainly wouldn't want to send a 5th rounder plus Ingram. So I don't know what it would take to get him, but I see him being about a 4th round value, maybe a late 3rd. And I think that Ingram, just based on, again, getting younger, saving money, trying to rebuild, I think that they might actually go for that. So that's my idea anyway. So Wyatt Teller, that's number 5 on my potential trade deadline list. And then my final guy, number 6, is defensive tackle BJ Hill out of Cincinnati. I don't think that Cincinnati considers themselves out of it just yet. But if we can't land Tomlinson and we can't convince the Giants to trade us Lawrence for a first, I think it's worth calling on Hill. Because he's been playing at a high level for several years, and he would improve the run defense immediately. Now, why would Cincinnati do it? Honestly, I'm not sure, but he's more plausible than some of the other names that I saw out there, like Simmons and Quinnen Williams. And so I just think maybe it's worth it to Cincinnati to get some value before he hits free agency. Because he's actually in the 3rd year of a 3-year free agent contract. So if you don't trade him now, he's just going to walk in free agency. You'll get nothing for him. Kind of like our Danielle Hunter's situation last year, where we decided that we were kind of still in the playoff hunt and we needed him. But maybe the Bengals look at things a little differently. Maybe they try to get some trade value for him, in advance. So we'll see. So the impact... Not the kind of impact that Dexter Lawrence would provide, obviously, but I actually think he'd be a little bit more of a better addition than Dalvin Tomlinson. He'd kind of provide the same role. He would kind of provide the same changes to the rotation. And really the only reason why I have him later on my list it's actually last, 6 out of 6, is simply because of the team's situation, which is kind of in limbo. You don't know if he'd even be available. We would only be getting him for the remainder of this year. He's a pending free agent, so you'd be paying draft capital for a guy who's probably leaving at the end of the year. So you're only getting him for part of a year. Is he a good enough player to make your defense, Super Bowl worthy? I don't know. Maybe. But so the money's in the final. Like I said, he's in the final year of a 3-year deal that pays him an average annual value of $10 million, which is super reasonable for a guy of his talent level. We'd be, again, just like I said, potentially wasting draft capital on, a slight improvement at defensive tackle, because he could leave at the end of the year. So I don't know. It's risky, and that's why I had it last. But the trade value, again, he's been a pretty good player. He doesn't make a ton of money. He's not too old. So I actually saw his trade value come in as like late 2nd, early 3rd, and so it may take at least the comp, if not the comp plus our 5th, just to get it done. And I honestly hate that. I wouldn't make that trade personally, but if they're really wanting to improve the defensive line, maybe they feel like it's necessary. But I'm skeptical of that move. But anyway, better than most other options. I had him coming in number 6, and that finishes out my 6 potential targets for the trade deadline. The regular guys list, right? Maybe some names you hadn't quite heard of in there. And I talked it all the way through. I looked at all the different, ways it could happen, all the different angles. And so I laid it out for you, okay? Then I have one final thought, and that's this. I think that we should trade Pat Jones II, and here's why. There's many different reasons. But the first one is that he is currently taking snaps away from Dallas Turner, our 1st-round draft pick, okay? We need to stop that. Because the best way for him to be utilized is to move him to a team who is looking for a defensive end who runs a 4-3, who can either use a starter or at least a rotational guy who thinks that they're going to be contending. And Pat Jones, he just turned 26. He's still a young guy. He's in the final year of his rookie contract, so he's extremely cheap. And he's a bigger dude. He's built more conventionally for a 4-3 defense to play end, and he's just not necessarily a fit in our scheme, even though he's been playing really, really well rotationally so far for us this year. So you add that to the fact that he's off to a great start. He has 5 sacks, 4 additional hurries on top of that, 10 what PFF calls stop plays, which is like a negative run play for the opposing offense. So he's playing he's rushing and playing the run both really well. And that's all in limited snaps. He's only played 185 total snaps so far this year. So his value literally could not be any higher than it is right now. Young, rookie contract, stats are starting to pile up. He's playing really well in limited time. So as his value is currently constructed, if a team really believes in Pat Jones, somebody who thinks that he could really make an impact for them, maybe help them aspire toward the playoffs, I think we could get potentially upwards of a 3rd round pick for him. And the team that I've personally targeted as a team that could really be a perfect fit for Pat Jones is Washington. I mean, they're on the rise. They could use help on the defense. They could use another pass rusher. I think that Quinn would really like a guy like Pat Jones. And so he could be a perfect fit for them. And so they have an extra 3rd rounder from their Jahan Dotson trade. And so I just think perhaps look out. These are some reasons that I've just laid out for you that Pat Jones may be on the move before the trade deadline. Another thing that I'll be super interested in, I'm done talking about Pat. This is kind of like a final thought, and then I'll kind of wrap up the show at an hour 20. It's this. We have, what is it? Today, we just turned, it's literally 12:01 a.m. here. We just turned to the 13th of October, okay? So we have 18 plus the 5. We have 23 days into the actual trade deadline. But with this impending game against Detroit, I am fearful, although our defense ranks 2nd against the run, I am fearful that Detroit is going to expose us badly and run all over us in that game, and that'll be the reason why they beat us. So I think that if we're going to make a big move for defensive tackle, I think that Kwesi should make the move now. Don't wait, do it now. Don't let Detroit get the better of us. Let's make that move now. Let's get that defensive tackle in here now, and let's be prepared for that Detroit run game and that offensive line, and let's win that game. So with that said, that completes the show, guys. So as you know, the mantra, which is, let me get ready, which is play vicious and be victorious. Peace.